This video is a COMcheck tutorial for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. You can access COMcheck at the URL shown on the screen. From this webpage, click Start COMcheck Web. This will pop up a new window. And the first thing that you want to do here, if you have not already set up an account, you'll want to register, and you do that in the top right corner. So click Register and enter an email address and a password. And then click Register. Once you've created that account, you'll use those credentials to log in. Again, in the top right. And the reason why you will want to set up an account is so that you can revisit projects later. So you can save projects and revisit them later at this My Projects dropdown. Once you're logged in, you want to start a new project. So click New Project on the left-hand side. And then we'll enter in a project title. I'll use tutorial, but you'll want to use some distinct name for your project here. And then I'll click Save. This will save it to my projects. In COMcheck, there are various tabs you can see here along the top. So we have a project tab, envelope, interior lighting, exterior lighting, and mechanical. And we'll look at each of these in the tutorial. I've gone ahead and filled out COMcheck for an example project. My project is an alteration project of a mixed-use building that has retail on the first floor and multifamily on the second and third floors. I filled out all of the tabs that you can see here in COMcheck because in my project, all of these components are being upgraded. The tabs that you need to fill out in COMcheck depend on the scope of your project. If your project is new construction, then you'll need to fill out all of the tabs. If it's an alteration project and these components are being upgraded, you'll need to fill out the tabs as well. If the component is not being upgraded, then you don't need to fill out the tab. Core and shell projects, where these components are unknown, also do not need to fill out these tabs. So we'll start here with the Project tab. And the first selection that needs to be made is the applicable code. In this dropdown, you'll want to look for 2020 New York Stretch 2018 IECC or 2020 New York Stretch 90.1 2016 Standard. These are essentially equivalent, and if you don't have a preference, select 90.1 2016 Standard. This will automatically set the state to New York, and you'll need to select the city that your project is located in or a nearby location if your city is not available in the dropdown. Next, you'll select the project type. So is your project new construction, addition, or alterations? I'll switch to a different project so I can show you that if you select new construction, you'll need to enter in this, make a selection in this efficiency dropdown. These come from C406, so you'll select the one that your project is following. I'll go back to my sample project. So there are a few sub-tabs here: building envelope area types, interior lighting method and areas, and exterior lighting areas. On the building envelope area types sub-tab, you'll enter in the overall building height in feet above grade. For my project, this is 33 feet. You would enter in the overall building height for your project. In this main section here, this is where you enter the different building area types. Like I said, I have retail on the first floor and multifamily on the second and third floors. You add additional building area types using this Add Building Area button, and then selecting the area type in the dropdown. You can set an area description if you would like, and you need to select the space conditioning category. For multifamily, this is residential, and for retail, it's non-residential. You also enter in the corresponding square footage associated with the building area. I'll move to the Interior Lighting Method and Areas tab. This is where you select either the building area method or the space by space method for interior lighting. In my project, I've selected the space by space method, and I've entered in two space types in my project. So I have retail, sales area, and my multifamily floors have a corridor. So I've entered in those space types here and the corresponding area. The dwelling units, we don't need to report the dwelling units here because there's no lighting power density allowance in 90.1 2016. So we won't need to enter those in. And you add your area categories or space types using that Add Area Category button and selecting the applicable space types or area types in your project. Finally, we'll go to the Exterior Lighting Areas sub-tab, and first we'll select the Exterior Lighting Zone type. For my project, I've selected Residential Mixed-Use Area. You'll want to select the appropriate exterior lighting zone type for your project. Then you add exterior lighting area applications that are in your project using this Add Exterior Area button and selecting the application type. For my project, I've entered in a stairway, parking area, and illuminated facade. You can optionally add an area description and then enter in this quantity column. For these applications, the unit is square feet. So I've entered in the square footage associated with these applications. This unit depends on the exterior lighting application type. So I'll show you if this was a walkway. This is no longer in square feet. This is actually linear feet of walkway length. So keep an eye out for what unit you should be entering this quantity in. Okay, that concludes the project tab, and next we'll move on to the envelope tab. The envelope tab in COMcheck is where you report the different building envelope components in your project. In my example, you can see that I've entered in a roof, a few exterior walls, a couple windows, and a door. Each component can be added using the buttons at the top here. So roof, skylights, exterior walls, interior walls, windows, doors, basement, and floors. Each component that you add, you'll need to select the assembly type, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I add a roof, you select your assembly type that you have in your project, and then click Create Roof. A similar process applies for all of these building envelope components. Each envelope component, you'll need to assign an orientation for the exterior walls, concrete density if that's applicable. You'll assign a building area type. So you can see that in my project, the roof is above the multifamily portion. I have exterior walls on the northeast, south, and west orientations for multifamily, and then northeast, south, and west for retail. You'll enter in any construction details. If your project is an alteration, keep an eye out for this alteration details column. This is where you would select if an exemption applies to your assembly in your project. So read through these and make the appropriate selection for your project. For my example, I've selected no exemptions apply. If applicable, you'll enter in a cavity insulation R value, continuous insulation R value, and this will calculate the U factor for you. For windows, windows are added to the exterior wall that the window is on. So you add a window by selecting the exterior wall and then clicking window, and then selecting the performance of your window in this screen. The same process applies for doors. So to add a door to an exterior wall, you'll select the exterior wall and click door, and then make the appropriate selections for your project. You can see the window performance details to the right here. So we have the U factor, visible transmittance, solar heat gain coefficient. And that is all for the envelope tab. Next, we'll do interior lighting. One quick note before we move on to interior lighting. After we've entered in all of the different envelope components in our project, and we've entered in the corresponding performance of those components, we can click this Check Compliance button. This will let us know if our envelope passes or fails. The Interior Lighting tab is where you report the different fixture counts and wattages associated with each space type that you reported on the Project tab. As you can see for my project, I have these two space types, sales area and corridor. Each of these spaces has corresponding fixtures. So here you can see fixture A2 and A3. These correspond to back of house for the sales area and a main sales floor. Each of these fixtures have a corresponding fixture wattage and a number of fixtures in this space. The corridors, they just have one fixture type, fixture A1. Fixture A1 is 25 watts, and there are 12 A1 fixtures in the corridors. To add your lights, you'll select one of these options above, depending on what you have in your project, while you've clicked on that space type. So to add additional lights to this corridor, I'll click on corridor and click LED. You'll select your LED type and then enter in lamps per fixture, number of fixtures, and fixture wattage. You can also enter in a fixture ID and a fixture description. This will calculate your total proposed wattage for these space types, as well as the allowed wattage. Once you've entered in all of your fixture counts and wattages, you can click Check Compliance. And this tells us whether or not our interior lighting passes. So you would follow a similar process for all of the spaces and fixtures in your project. Next, we'll look at exterior lighting. This is very similar to interior lighting. So COMcheck will bring in the different exterior lighting applications that we reported on the Project tab. For my project, you can see it's bringing in that stairway, parking area, and illuminated area of facade. For each of these applications, you enter in the corresponding fixtures. Just like interior lighting, you'll enter fixture ID, fixture description, lamps per fixture, number of fixtures, and fixture wattage. So to add additional lights to a exterior lighting application. You'll click on that application and then add the corresponding lighting type that you have in your project. I'll click LED for this example. And that will add an additional fixture to that exterior lighting application. Then you'll enter in all the same information as you did for interior lighting. So you'll follow this process for all of the exterior lighting applications and fixtures in your project. Then once you've entered in all of your information here, you'll click Check Compliance. And this tells us whether or not our exterior lighting passes. Next, we'll look at the Mechanical tab. This is where you report the HVAC system types and the water heater types. You also report details such as quantity, equipment capacity, fuel type / heat source, condenser type, fan system, other details, other system details, and efficiencies. To add an HVAC system, heat pump, plant, or water heater, you would click on the corresponding buttons above. So I'll show you. If I click on HVAC system, then I would need to enter in the heating equipment type and cooling equipment type. I would also need to enter in other information such as equipment capacity, quantity, and some of this other information that we looked at. Water heaters, you enter by selecting water heater and selecting the water heater type. You also need to enter in the fuel type / heat source, equipment capacity, and quantity. So you'll follow this process for all of the HVAC systems, water heaters, the mechanical systems in your project. One quick note before we move on to the Requirements tab. So when we click this Check Compliance button, you can see that COMcheck runs the compliance check for envelope, interior lighting, and exterior lighting. For the Mechanical tab, COMcheck does this check for each piece of equipment individually. And so if I scroll to the right here, and we're looking at our HVAC unit, this VRF, we can see these columns for the proposed efficiency and the minimum required efficiency. And so if I were to enter a proposed efficiency that doesn't meet the minimum required efficiency, COMcheck will flag this. It says the value for proposed efficiency must be greater than 7.7. And so this is how you know if your mechanical systems are meeting the minimum requirements. The last tab in COMcheck is the Requirements tab. This tab is divided into project, envelope, interior lighting, exterior lighting, and mechanical. On each of these sub-tabs, you'll see a list of requirements on the left that you can click through. These requirements are mandatory requirements, and so this tab is designed to help project teams verify that each of the applicable requirements will be met. And so the process is to go through each of these sub-tabs and all of these requirements, read through the requirement, and if the requirement will be met, you would click this checkbox. In some cases, an exception will apply. For my project, it's a pretty small building. It's less than 25,000 square feet, so this exception would apply. And so you'd want to read through any applicable exceptions, and if they apply, then you would select it. You'd go through each of these sub-tabs to verify that all mandatory requirements will be met. On the Mechanical tab, you can actually filter these checks. So generic mechanical, HVAC system specific checks. There's also a plant some plant requirements, but these requirements are dynamic, and so only the applicable requirements will show. We did not report any plants on the mechanical tab, which is why this is telling us no plant requirements apply. Once you've finished going through the requirements, I want to check compliance one last time, verify that they all pass, and then we can export our report. And you'll do so at this Reports button in the top right. By default, at this dropdown, these will all be selected: envelope, interior lighting, exterior lighting, and mechanical. You want all of these to be selected. And then you'll click on the Reports button. Then it should say your compliance report is ready. If you click on this hyperlink, it will download the compliance reports, and they look like this. So right now we're looking at the envelope compliance certificate. You can see project information. This is all of the building area information that we entered on the project tab. These are all of the envelope assemblies that we reported. Here you can see the roof, all of the exterior walls, and where applicable, the doors and windows. There's also the interior lighting compliance certificate. This shows the allowed interior lighting power for each of our space types. And it also shows the proposed interior lighting power. So it shows our space types and the different fixtures and fixture wattages and fixture counts. Similar thing is shown for exterior lighting. Shows all of our exterior lighting applications, shows the allowed exterior lighting power, as well as the proposed exterior lighting power. And we also have our mechanical compliance certificate that shows all of the mechanical systems that we reported in COMcheck. There's also this inspection checklist that is at the end of the compliance report that comes out of COMcheck. And this inspection checklist has all of those requirements that you saw on the Requirements tab in COMcheck. And it shows that for any of the requirements that you report that the requirement will be met within COMcheck, we'll have this note: requirement will be met under the comments/assumptions column. If you reported that an exception applies, it will note that exception here. And so this COMcheck compliance report is required to be submitted for review. This concludes the COMcheck tutorial for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative.